Okay, much better. We're good. All right. All right, I'm going to redo the intro so that I can clip off this beginning for the podcast. But everyone that was here will know the truth that I screwed up the opening. But yeah, no, some weird source got turned on. I don't know what happened here. But all right, we're going to redo the intro, everybody. Okay, we're good. Okay. I'm going to pretend that that didn't happen. All right. Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of the Falcoholic Live, presented by FanDuel. Episode 359 of the show coming to you. Definitely didn't have to redo this intro because of an echo. So thank you guys for your patience once again. Thank you for sticking with us through a tough 2025 season. Things were looking pretty dire there at the end. I know a lot of people, myself included, were very, very concerned about the buzz that Arthur Blank was planning to keep Raheem Morris. That buzz ended up being incorrect. And, you know, I don't know if that was sort of a Falcons just playing this kind of close to the vest thing or if people were just kind of guessing. But no matter the cause, it seems like Arthur Blank actually had made up his mind after the Falcons were eliminated from the playoffs, which is, you know, I think most of us had probably made up our minds before that, but that was, I think, the real kicker, especially after the Jets loss. And we're getting wholesale changes here, and I know we discussed a lot of that on our sort of impromptu show earlier this week, just kind of covering the news as it happened. Obviously, we've heard a lot more since then. Arthur Blank has put out a full letter to the fans that we can dive into a little bit. The Falcons did a modification to Kirk Cousins' contract that is important, so we'll get to that a little bit tonight. Obviously, we have a huge list of president of football candidates, which is a new position that the Falcons are creating to sort of lead their football division, with Rich McKay stepping away and Greg Beadles, who was the previous president, moving into more of a CEO, like business leader role. So they're creating basically a sort of overall vision person. And while they have interviewed quite a few people for this job, we all know that it's going to be Matt Ryan, right? I mean, I don't think that's a big surprise to anyone. Everyone kind of is saying that. Everything that I've heard is that, yes, this is these interviews are more for general manager. And I think multiple of these people that they've interviewed for president of football, these are more or less like general manager interviews, not necessarily like serious contention for president of football. Obviously, there are rules that you need to have a certain number of interviews. And, you know, I think we all can probably agree that the Rooney Rule doesn't really accomplish what it's designed to do, and it needs to be like fixed to actually, you know, do what it's supposed to do and help deserving minority coaches get more opportunities. But, you know, right now it's just kind of like a box the teams check. So unfortunately, that's the sort of the situation. And hopefully we can actually like do something meaningful with it at some point. But in the meantime, it does appear that it will be Matt Ryan as president of football. I was kind of hoping they would announce it right before the show started. And I think that we may very well get an announcement soon, like maybe even during the show. That's kind of my read on it, but they may also just wait just to mess with us. It might be just as soon as I end the show, they'll do it. Doesn't matter when I end it. They're paying attention now. They won't let me get away with it. But at this stage, that is sort of where we are. That the Falcons are going to first hire a president of football. That will be Matt Ryan, presumably, and then they will go out and hire a GM and coach, which Ryan is going to sort of lead the searches for those. So they're not really going to start. Sorry, my microphone is like falling down on me for some reason. They're not really going to start the search for those guys in earnest until Matt Ryan is officially named the president, and he's going to lead the interviews and things of that nature. So that's why we haven't heard of the Falcons actually like interviewing any head coaches yet. Some teams have started doing that. I would not be like concerned about that for like a timeline thing. I think all of the coaches that the Falcons have already reached out to a bunch of guys that they want to interview. They've made it clear that they're very interested. I don't think any of these guys are going to take an offer without at least talking to the Falcons. I think a lot of these guys, especially Clint Kubiak, he can't even take the job until the Seahawks are out of the playoffs. So there's not really a huge rush. I do believe the Falcons will make sure to get Kubiak's interview done this weekend, like before he's like ineligible to interview for the playoffs and all this. But a lot of these guys are available, and there's not really much of a rush. because I think the coaches that are being highly coveted and are like being chased after right now is John Harbaugh. That's the guy that I think multiple teams, namely the Dolphins and the Giants, are chasing hard and trying to get. I think personally the Giants will get Harbaugh if they want him, although the Dolphins, are interested. So we'll see how that goes. But at this stage, I don't really think. I think the Falcons would love to talk to John Harbaugh. I think he's the type of coach that Blank would absolutely love to have in the building, and at the very least get like Harbaugh's take on sort of their football operation and if what he thinks about it and that sort of stuff. I don't think Harbaugh's really a serious contender here. Not that he's like not qualified for it. I do think the Falcons kind of realize they're probably not prying him away from either the Giants or maybe the Dolphins, who are probably willing to throw a lot more at him. I also think the Falcons really want to establish an offensive identity with an offensive head coach, and not have to worry about getting into the spiral they did with Dan Quinn, where they just lost their offensive mastermind, and then the team kind of spiraled because they couldn't replace him. I think it seems like Arthur Blank has learned his lesson from that. It might be Matt Ryan pushing this as well, which makes me immediately appreciate, Matt Ryan even more if he is the driver behind this. But apparently this will be Matt Ryan's show. He's going to be leading this charge for the Falcons, and I'm excited to see it. I do think that these Falcons with Matt Ryan at the helm, a cohesive vision. We could obviously talk about what Arthur Blank said in his letter, which really a lot of it spoke to me. A lot of you might remember I wrote an article a couple months ago, or maybe a month ago at this point, talking about how Raheem Morris hadn't earned a third year, and trying to be as objective as possible looking at it, but also kind of pointing out a lot of the things that we've noticed. And one of those things was that the Falcons don't really have a cohesive vision. They don't really they're not really playing winning football. It's confusing. It seems like they're a rudderless ship at times. And I wrote that for you guys, but I really hoped that Arthur Blank would read it, because Arthur Blank does read the Falcoholic. I've heard that from people that would know that. So, I was hoping that, obviously I don't think I'm influencing Arthur Blank in any way. I'm not trying to sound like that type of guy, but I was hopeful that the organization and people in it would read that article and take that stuff to heart. And, I hope that they did, and I hope that some of those things in there resonated with them and led us, at least in some small part, because I'm far from the only person bringing up these things, but at least in some part maybe would get the team on the right track and kind of give them the pulse of the fans. A lot of you I know share a lot of the same critiques and same concerns. And, I think that hopefully has happened. I'm very encouraged by the letter that Arthur Blank wrote. I'm encouraged that they moved on immediately. And, I think there's a lot of opinions, more interesting opinions about whether Terry Fontenot was the right GM or not, and whether that was a mistake. I think pretty much everyone is in concert about the Raheem Morris firing, that needed to happen. But there's a lot, to cover tonight, because the Falcons have also expressed interest in keeping Jeff Ulbrich, who was the best part of their coaching staff last year, and they've already blocked interviews for him. So that is part of maybe this team, keeping things rolling on the defensive side of the ball. That would be nice to see. So I'm really liking basically the initial stuff that we're seeing here from this team, and I like that. It's nice to actually be happy about something the team is doing for a change, because there wasn't a whole lot of that this season after the offseason, right? I mean, I think a lot of us liked the draft, and that ended up being a home run. Unfortunately, not enough to save Fontenot's job, but he did nail his last draft with three big-time contributors at the top, and a lot of players in there that I think are encouraging and looking good. I think even last year's draft is looking a lot better at this stage, so we will see how that class develops and plays out, and I certainly thank Terry Fontenot for delivering one of his best drafts, and I think a good free agency period too. But we got a long way to go. Maybe not as long as away as a lot of people seem to think. I think there's a lot of negativity about this Falcons job, and a lot of people saying like, oh, the Falcons have no quarterback and they don't have a way to get one, so that means that no one's going to want this job. And I think that's an over-exaggeration, because there is a pretty reasonable chance that Michael Penix will be ready to play in September. I don't know if he'll be ready for week 1, but we're not talking, I think, about Penix missing like 3 months of the season. He may or may not be ready for week 1, because that's a lot to ask. I think the Falcons have tried to put out like that this is a very rosy timeline. We've obviously seen guys recover from injuries ahead of schedule. So if he does recover ahead of schedule, one thing I would say in Penix's favor is that he has already gone through multiple ACL rehabs. He knows exactly what the process is. He's unfortunately, you never like to say this, but he's experienced in this rehab. He's done it multiple times. That could actually lead to him having a little bit of a faster recovery timeline because he is so experienced and knowledgeable in the rehab and what he's supposed to be doing. So we'll hope, obviously, that is the case, and Penix is eyeing a week 1 return. I'm sure that will be the reporting, until it's not. But that's kind of where we're starting with that quarterback discussion. But before we dive in, the quarterback is a good place to start. We're going to do that here in just a moment. And we're going to get to, obviously, Kirk Cousins. I think that's where we'll start tonight's discussion before we dive into all of these candidates that they're looking at for president, for head coach, for general manager. Real quick, let me crack this. There we go. Shout out to Downey's Ciders. I've been slacking on my brews portion of the show, so that's one thing we're going to work on this offseason. I'm going to try to have some interesting brews and hard ciders and other things of that nature on here for you guys to talk about. This is Downey's Overboard, which is their very strong cider. It's 8%. I bought a multi-pack. This is the only ones that are left. They're actually quite tasty, and it's quite dangerous. So if you're going to drink these, be judicious with how you use these 8% ciders. Nice stuff, though. New York and Maine and all these Northeast states make some great ciders. If you're into that, they're a lot better than they used to be. It ain't Angry Orchard anymore. So I'm gonna pull up real quick Kirk Cousins' contract information so that we can be totally on board here with what's going on. But all right. Sorry, guys. 1 second. Usually I have, a co-host here to take the reins while I'm like typing in, the data so I can pull it up for you guys. But we're fine. So tonight, obviously Adnan is covering, I believe the Hawks are doing something of that nature. And I just had to get you guys a live show. I couldn't wait for anyone else to come available. We just had to get this going tonight. Sorry, 1 second, guys. Okay. So what the Falcons did, they called this a modified restructure. That's how it was reported. It's not a restructure really, because as I'm sure you guys are aware, a restructure is a relatively basic contract maneuver, and a standard restructure, like a typical restructure, doesn't require the player's permission, because all the team does in a standard restructure is they take base salary, which is typically not guaranteed, and they pay it out immediately as a signing bonus. And the idea of doing that is that when you convert base salary to signing bonus, it's prorated over the length of the contract. So that means you spread out everything you took away from that base salary over the remaining length of the contract. Obviously, the longer the contract goes on, the more savings you will create. That is a traditional restructure. And the reason players don't have to agree to it is because there's no reason they would ever decline it, because they get the money immediately as a signing bonus, and as a signing bonus, it is guaranteed because you get it in your hand right then. So there's no downside for the player. They get more guaranteed money or the same amount of guaranteed money, but they just get it immediately instead of base salary, which is paid out on a weekly basis over the course of the season. So all that to say that, that's not what the Falcons did. I know a lot of people really panicked when this happened because they were like, oh my God, are the Falcons like keeping Kirk Cousins? Like, are they like committing to him long-term and all this? Because you hear the word restructure and that's what you would think, right? That's not the case. This is not a restructure. They basically modified his contract with Kirk, and you have to have the player's permission to change the contract. What they did, to make it very clear, is they took his base salary, just like that's why they called it a restructure, because it's a similar idea, but they took as much of his base salary as they could, which was $32.9 million of 35. I think there's like 2.1. There's a certain minimum amount that the player has to make base salary wise based on their accrued years of experience. So I think that was like $3 million or $2.1 million or whatever it was. That that amount has to stay. They can't reduce it any lower than that. So the rest of it, that 32.9 million, they took that and they actually moved it all the way to 2027. So they took that base salary, moved it to 2027, and basically made it unguaranteed, sort of extra base salary. So they just sort of shifted the money later in the contract, but they didn't convert it to base salary. So it's actually, or they didn't convert it to signing bonus. So it's not guaranteed, and it doesn't increase his cap hit at all. It doesn't increase his dead money next year at all, or any of these things. It basically just moved the money out of this season to next year. And what that accomplished was that the Falcons saved $32.9 million this year right away. They can just use the money for whatever they want right now, which is really nice. They did not have money without doing this move. And it's part of the reason I was telling people there's no way they can keep him without like really seriously changing his contract, because they simply don't have any cap space. So at this stage, Kirk Cousins agreed to do this. He took this money and moved it, which doesn't change his compensation. It doesn't change his guaranteed money at all. So there's really no reason for him to do it other than just to be nice. But what this does in addition is it sets a deadline for the Falcons to release Kirk Cousins. So this money that they moved will guarantee on March 13th or whatever the language is. So more or less, Kirk Cousins has secured his eventual release by March 13th in exchange for moving the money into a future year to just do the Falcons a solid this offseason, let them have some money to spend at the beginning of free agency right away, all that stuff. It also, like, you know, it would help with the dead money split and all this stuff, whatever, in a minor way. But for the most part, it's just, I think, you know, Kirk Cousins is not, like, this is, if anything, this is a sign that Kirk Cousins and the Falcons are on good terms. Both agree Cousins needs to go somewhere else. The Falcons can't pay him his, you know, contract, and there's really not an easy way for them to, like, fix this contract in a way that makes sense for both sides. So the Falcons asked him to move his salary, and then in exchange, they will make sure they will release him before March 13th. Now, there's one other thing that they could do, which is that they could just agree to tear this contract up before March 13th and sign a new deal. You know, they would have to roll over any bonus money, like any prorated money that Cousins is owed still, but otherwise they could tear up the contract and do completely new terms or whatever you want. So all this does is basically make it so that Kirk Cousins is not going to return. He is going to be released prior to March 13th unless the new coach really, really loves Kirk Cousins and wants to try to keep him for another year as like a bridge starter. I don't really see why Cousins would be super interested in that, because I think someone, probably the Vikings, he would probably rather go there, you know, to do that rather than start another, you know, series, another fresh coaching staff here. You know, we'll see. But basically, this was not a standard type of contract maneuver. So I did want to make sure to break it down for folks, because it was a little, you know, weird. It's not typical. It's not something you see very often. It's not something I've seen recently. So just wanted to break it down for you guys. Hopefully that's clear, or clear enough at least for somebody that it helps explain it. Basically you can sort of write Kirk Cousins off, and also, you know, the Falcons have a bunch of money now, which is great. You know, that's great. That we all love that. So at this stage, the Atlanta Falcons do have, I believe, 30-ish million in cap space to play with here. And they can create a lot more with other moves, which they will do. And also when they do release Kirk Cousins, I believe they will create, they probably won't be able to create a whole lot more, but they shouldn't be too impacted if they do a June 1st cut, because all this money like that he's owed is already sort of accounted for. He's already, you know, his prorated signing bonus this year is already factored in the cap, and next year's, because of the post-June 1st cut, if you do that, that won't impact the cap until next year. So they've gotten the savings I think that they can get from Cousins. The only thing that's left now is if they release him and he signs elsewhere, if he signs for more than $10 million, then the Falcons, I believe, will get an offset of that roster bonus that he's also owed. So they could get up to $10 million, I think, in additional cap space, depending on what happens with him signing elsewhere. But we'll have to see how that goes down the line. And that offset language is weird. There may be like other stipulations or other things involved in that. I don't actually have the contract in my hand, so I can't tell you exactly how that works. But that was the understanding that I had. So Kirk Cousins is not going to be here probably after this season. Probably, he will be released early in March, have an opportunity to go elsewhere and start. And the Falcons will be moving forward probably with another bridge quarterback before we get, Michael Penix back. Hopefully Penix is ready for week 1, but, I think that would be an aggressive timeline. So we'll see how that goes. All right, I know we got a bunch of donations. We're going to get to those in just a second. Real quick, got to bring you guys a word from our sponsor. You know who it is. They're back. It's ZipRecruiter. Folks, I know that we all have goals that we want to get to in 2026. I know that the Falcons have goals, right? They want to win big. They want to hire the right people to get them to where they need to go. Maybe they need a new president of football. Maybe they need a new head coach. Maybe they need a new GM. But it's hard to find people who are so good at what they do. It's like when you're hiring for your business. How can you find the best people for all the different roles on your team? It's easy. For the Falcons, they use Sportsology or whatever, but, that's out of the budget for most people to hire like an elite firm, right? So what you are going to do is you're going to use ZipRecruiter. And right now you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/audio. ZipRecruiter's matching technology works fast to find you top talent so you don't waste your time or your money. You can find out right away how many job seekers are in your area and are qualified for the role you're posting for. And with ZipRecruiter's advanced resume database, you can instantly unlock top candidates' contact information. So let ZipRecruiter help you find the best people for all your roles. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. See for yourself. Just go to this exclusive web address right now to try ZipRecruiter for free. ZipRecruiter, ZipRecruiter.com/audio. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/audio. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. All right, so we got Solaire with a couple donations here. Thank you, buddy. Says Raheem Fontenot, mere vessels to the curse. They dissipate, yet the darkness lingers. Should ice become president, fate will turn its eye to Evan. It is his destiny to bend Matt Ryan to the will of the Red Helmets. Evan, free us from the draft takes curse. Yes, I will make sure to get that message to Evan as well, Solaire. But yeah, I know Solaire also has a serious take with another $2. Thank you, Solaire. Says, in all seriousness, the Ryan hire would suggest that Arthur may be thinking long-term. He wants someone he truly trusts in place when Josh Blank takes over. Rich McKay clearly wasn't that guy. And now the real question, Cutter versus Robinson, who was worse? It's a tough call. I will say, Dirk Cutter early on in his career, Dirk Cutter did deliver some good offenses. I think teams just kind of figured him out. And he was never really able to call a good run game. It was kind of the opposite with Zach Robinson, where he was able to get a good run game here, but that was probably mostly due to the personnel, not necessarily him. And Cutter was just from a different era, and I think his offense did work well for a time. I'm not really sure Zach Robinson offense ever really worked well in Atlanta. It seemed confusing on many levels. It seemed like he wasn't sure what he wanted to do. He didn't really trust his quarterback, I think. Which is problematic. And I think there was a lot of issues there. I tweeted about it today. So we can get to Penix too tonight if you guys want. You guys are welcome to ask anything you want as we kind of get through all these coaching search things. But at the end of the day, I feel like Zach Robinson is probably worse. That's my take. Maybe that's controversial, but Dirk Cutter, to his credit, he did have a couple of years of some pretty good offenses here in Atlanta. 2012 is a great example. So. I'm not sure that Robinson ever reached those heights. Maybe he will elsewhere. Hopefully not with the Bucs. Hopefully he will go to the Bucs and deliver what he delivered here, which was very strange looking offense for most of the season. We got Spenny with the $2 Canadian donation. What's up, Canada? Says Stefanski seems like the fit, experience, and offense guy. Yeah, if you base it on the buzz that we've heard, which is that the Falcons want an offensive coach and they want someone with previous head coaching experience. Stefanski would seem to make perfect sense. I think Mike McDaniel, now that he's been let go, also would fit that criteria. However, I will shout out my guy Benjamin Albright, who is fairly connected and does hear a lot of buzz about all of these things. I do think that what he said, that Clint Kubiak is a serious contender in Atlanta, that tracks with sort of where my mind is at as well. I think those are your top 3 guys. If Matt LaFleur does get released, I do think that, Matt LaFleur will probably rise to the top of that list, but I believe the Dolphins really would like Matt LaFleur as well, especially if they don't get John Harbaugh. So we'll see with that. But yeah, I do think Stefanski is very high on the list, and I think Stefanski is a lot better of a coach than people are giving him credit for. I don't think people are respecting enough how gross the situation is in Cleveland, and how I bet Stefanski's probably pretty happy to be out of there. If I had to guess, I would think Stefanski probably feels free. All right. So we got Ed 4417 with the £5. Excuse me. Don't want to slander the great UK here. Saying, hey, Kev, just want to say a big thank you for your coverage this season. Made the season bearable for a Falcons friend from London with zero ties to ATL. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Ed. It helps me too. Part of this is to dissipate my stress after the games on Sunday. It was something that I struggled with for a while, and I found that the post games actually helped me a lot. So I hope they help you too if you're stressed out about it. It feels good to talk about it with people that understand what we're talking about and can share our frustrations or share our celebrations. Hopefully, we'll have more of those in the future. We got Real Talk Gentleman, the $5. Cool name, like that one. Kevin, what's your ideal hire for each position? All right, I will say, I don't know if Matt LaFleur is going to be out there. So that makes it a little complicated. So we'll have to assume, we're just going to base this on who's available right now. So for president, obviously I want Matt Ryan. I think everyone does. It's going to be Matt Ryan. We may hear about it very, very soon. I'm still hoping that it will get announced tonight. So I don't think there's a whole lot of intrigue there. I also think there's not a whole lot of intrigue with GM. I think it will be Ian Cunningham. I actually think Ian Cunningham's a great candidate. He's got a lot of experience. He's been rising through the ranks. He has worked with, I believe, both the Ravens and Eagles, if I read his resume correctly. He's become the assistant GM with the Bears, who also just had a great offseason. He's got a lot of connections with a lot of good teams. He's been working his way up, and I am a big fan of Ian Cunningham. So I'm all in on that. I don't really know much about him other than that. It's kind of, you don't get as many direct results from these guys as you do with a head coach. It's easier to sort of evaluate some of these guys based on what they're doing on the field, but I think he's very interesting. And then a head coach, there's so many variables here. I would say not including Matt LaFleur, I think my top three would probably be man, it's tough because I like a lot of these offensive guys that have come available. I think probably, if you put me on the spot, probably Stefanski, Clint Kubiak, Mike McDaniel in that order. But I think you could shuffle those three, and I would be pretty much okay with any of them. I do think Mike McDaniel here, if we can keep Jeff Ulbrich, would make a ton of sense too. I think that was kind of McDaniel's issue, was that he never really was able to get that side of the ball where it needed to be. And I also think Miami's general manager and roster construction was very poor, and McDaniel was trying to make chicken salad out of chicken, So I honestly, I like all of these guys. I think Clint Kubiak is kind of the next up and comer. You can tell by how much interest there is in him, how he's been able to kind of work around Seattle's limitations on the offensive line, especially in the run game, how he's been able to deliver another great season for a quarterback in Sam Darnold that has limits. But I think all three of those guys are really interesting. And then I think if Matt LaFleur were to become available, he's probably my number one. I just think the connections are too strong. Now I do think that, Miami will really try to pry him away. So we'll see what happens there. But I think all of those guys, you had Matt LaFleur to that. There's four, I think, really strong candidates. So we'll see. I think the Falcons are leaning towards that experience. So that probably does favor guys like Stefanski and Mike McDaniel. But we'll see. We got Jarrett Pitts with the $5. Thanks, Jarrett. Do you believe in Matt Ryan as the head of football operations? Yeah, I do. It's hard to evaluate because this is a new position. There's not a ton of teams that sort of have this. I think the best example is Chris Spielman joining the Lions and kind of being that vision guy. And I think the thing that makes me confident is that I really do feel that Matt Ryan has a good read on what it takes to build a good football team. He's been a part of good football teams, and he's been a part of bad football teams. He's seen the full gamut of coaching. He's seen the highs. He's seen the lows. And I think he's learned a lot from that. He's led players on the field, in the locker room. He knows the temperature of the locker room. I think he will really connect with the players on a way that a lot of these personnel guys may or may not be able to as well, especially because Ryan was such a recent player and such a high profile one. It's sort of like working with a living legend, you know. It's a unique thing. I think it's a bold thing, and I generally like bold moves, you know. I do think that, like, I just feel like Matt Ryan has got a good head on his shoulders. I think he's a reasonable guy. I don't think he's going to be like overly involved in like the minutia. I think he's more of an overall sort of vibes guy, if that makes sense. Like, I think Matt Ryan has a vision for what he wants this team to be. I think he knows what he wants. I think he has a great plan for his general manager, and he probably has strong thoughts on the coaches as well, but he wants to talk to them, obviously. I think Matt Ryan wants an offensive powerhouse, and he wants a good defense. And I don't know what he will lean towards. I know some people might just assume that he wants like a high-flying passing attack like he had here for so long, but you know, you guys remember, like, he had the most success in that Kyle Shanahan offense. I believe Matt Ryan will go for that balanced, play-action heavy, diverse offense, and I think that will be what Ryan sort of leans toward, is that sort of Shanahan style offense and Shanahan style coach. And, you know, look at who they're interviewing. Pretty much all of those guys are that. So, you know, the Falcons are going to cast a wide net and look at a lot of coaches, including defensive guys. But I do think that it's going to be an offensive guy, and it's probably going to be one of the four guys that we talked about just a minute ago. So, and I think if they do that, I have a lot of faith in Ryan. I do think that he's more plugged in than someone like Rich McKay, even if he doesn't have the front office experience. Sometimes you need an outsider, you know? I mean, he's not really an outsider. He's not like me stepping in would be a total outsider, and that would probably be a disaster for the record. I'm not asking for that job. If the team wants to talk to me, maybe I can consult on some cap stuff or whatever, you know, maybe get my feet wet before. I don't want to just be elevated to GM. That sounds like an absolute nightmare. You guys would probably hate me within like 6 months, and I don't want that smoke right now. But it is a tough job, and, you know, there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of relationship building and management, and Matt Ryan knows about all those things. And so he's kind of an outsider without really being an outsider, and I'm really interested to see how it goes. I think it's fascinating, and I really like Matt Ryan. I think we all do, so it's easy to cheer for him, no doubt about that. We got Solaire with another 2 here. I genuinely think Clint Kubiak could be a great long-term hire, but only if his dad comes along as an advisor. It doesn't get talked about much, but Mike Shanahan helped Kyle a lot. Plus, having someone from the Shanahan tree brings in good assistance when needed. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, if I would be all for that. Like, if Gary wanted to come in and be a consultant or like an offensive assistant or, you know, an assistant head coach or whatever, that would be sweet. I've wanted Gary Kubiak here for like a decade now, so if he'd be willing to do that, I would be all for it. I think that would make a ton of sense. You know, obviously, I feel more confident in someone like a Clint Kubiak because the Falcons do have Jeff Ulbrich here, who has experience as a head coach. He's been there. He can manage the defense. Clint won't need to intercede on that side of the ball. We can trust Jeff Ulbrich with that. The Falcons have a defensive staff basically ready to go. Ulbrich seems interested in staying. You know, I'm sure there may be, you know, some buzz, like if Robert Saleh gets a job, maybe he would be tempted to go there, but I also think he's not. I don't think Ulbrich wants out of Atlanta. You know, I think it will depend on the head coach that's hired. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense, Solaire. We got Aaron Muniz with the $5. Thank you, Aaron. Saying, hey, man, been a listener for a while now. Thank you so much. First time donating. Also, thank you so much. Thank you for all the work that you do. Will the next coach believe in Penix? It's a great question, Aaron. The answer is I don't know. Because if I was in the interview room, I could probably tell you. But my guess is no. No one's just going to summarily abandon Michael Penix. He will get a shot this year unless whatever bridge guy they bring in just is absolutely crushing it. And you know. We'll have to see what happens with that, but I do think Penix is going to get a shot here. I don't think anyone's going to just write him out of that, you know, position. There's been a lot invested in him, and as much as people were getting frustrated with like Penix just being kind of mid last year, which again for a rookie quarterback is not problematic. That's kind of what you would expect in a quarterback's first 17 games, and we did see a lot of the guys who started really strong as rookies, struggle more as second-year players, and there does tend to be an equilibrium where these young quarterbacks, they have growing pains. It's a normal thing. I think, you know, part of Penix's struggles were obviously Zach Robinson related, and I tweeted about it. You know, I think this is a good time to sort of get to the Penix thing, which is that I think Penix was not set up for success. I think that, and this is my personal opinion. I wish that Zach Robinson would tell me what he was doing. I've been trying to figure it out all year. But I think at this stage, the short reasoning I have is I think Zach Robinson sort of put the training wheels on for Penix. I don't know why he believed that was necessary, but he did. And I think instead he should have just called the offense he wanted to call and trust Penix to execute it the way it needed to be, the way it needed to be done, not have a bunch of restrictions on it, not limit it, whatever. And then we're going to have to deal with the growing pains, but then you would actually have development. And I think the approach that they took, it stifled Penix's development. It limited the offense. It was too predictable. It did not work. And I think it didn't really help anyone. And maybe the truth is that Penix wasn't ready to execute the offense the way that Zach Robinson wanted. But I feel like that's a failure of the Falcons staff as opposed to a failure by Michael Penix, because I don't think they adequately prepared him to play under center. Penix didn't play a lot under center in college. He's made it clear that he knows how to do it, and he would be happy to learn how to do it or get better at it. I don't think they put in the time this offseason or in camp to get him ready to play under center the way they needed to. I think they didn't, dedicate the time they needed to get the play action rhythm down. I think they sort of decided strangely to just kind of put the training wheels on this thing. And I don't think that did him any favors. I don't think it did the offense any favors. Maybe it would have looked worse early on if Penix was trying to execute this complicated offense with all this stuff that Zach Robinson wanted. And, and it didn't work out, right? But I think at least if you were doing that, you'd be able to see Penix's limitations and know for sure that was the issue. And he'd actually be getting the necessary reps to improve those things. We also know that there were issues with personnel. The wide receiver core with Darnell Mooney's injury was rough. They fired their very good wide receiver coach 3 weeks into the season, and there was no further development from anyone at that point. The Falcons were just kind of stuck in the mud at receiver. We did see good things from Kyle Pitts, and him stepping up late in the season was a big boost. But I think it was always going to be tough with no Darnell Mooney, with your right tackle, who was his blindside protector, out for the season, with their very good swing tackle out for the season. Elijah Wilkinson made it work. Despite his very bad penalties, he was a serviceable swing tackle, which for your third or fourth offensive tackle, guy that you're basically converting to play tackle because you're out of tackles. I think that's as good as you could hope. And I don't think it was totally terrible, but the offensive line took a step back. The Falcons gambled on Ryan Neusel at center, and while I think Neusel's blocking was mostly fine, it was clearly a downgrade from Drew Dahlman. I really don't think they needed to let Drew Dahlman go. I think that was an unforced error. That was a mistake. As much as I like Neusel and still think he can grow into a solid to above average starting center, and I think he was a solid starting center, but an average starting center is going to have his issues. They went from having a force at center to sort of an average starter there. Caleb McGarry's going to be coming back. That should help. But yeah, there's a lot that we need to work on personnel wise that would have helped Penix's development too, I think, and we'll see. But I don't really think that Penix was served well by the Zach Robinson experience, and I think the team was not served well either. And I would really have liked to see Penix have because at the end, you look at the offense at the end of 2024 versus what we saw in 2025, and it's very different. There didn't seem to be a lot of restrictions on Penix in 2024, and he was letting it rip. It looked good. There was play action. There was everything we wanted to see, and then the Falcons just kind of went away from that. So don't really have a good explanation for that. I think they dropped the ball with his preparation. They did not get him where he needed to be before the season. And yeah, I'm hoping that the next coach will be better at that. And, hopefully Penix will be able to return sooner than expected. But if not, hopefully we'll get a serviceable bridge guy in here for a year. And we'll see how that goes. So we'll see. Yeah. But getting back to the overall discussion of the search, we've kind of talked about Matt Ryan at president. That is going to happen, right? And we will see when that is officially going to happen, but my guess would be soon, like very, very soon. So, GM, again, I also think is more or less decided. I think a lot of these guys that they brought in for president were guys that they were interested in for GM, like Brant Tillis and, Josh Williams. All these guys I think would be interesting GM candidates. I do think that it's going to be Ian Cunningham. I think he wants to be the GM here. I think Ryan wants him here. I think there's not very much intrigue there. I think it's going to be Matt Ryan and Ian Cunningham, and they will probably be hired pretty quickly. Maybe even by, I think Matt Ryan could be hired tonight or tomorrow, and I think Cunningham will probably be hired by Monday or Tuesday. Coach is probably going to drag on because I think they want to talk to a lot of these guys. And, some of these guys they may not be able to talk to for a while, especially if they want a second interview with Clint Kubiak. But, if they're in love with Kevin Stefanski, or if they're really into, Mike McDaniel, or if Matt LaFleur gets released by the Packers, then they could make one of those hires next week. But I don't really think there's a huge rush because, despite what some people say, I really don't think the Falcons' job is bad. I think a lot of people look too much at the resources and not enough at the context of the team. Like, people are like, oh, the Raiders' job is so good. Who the hell wants to go to the Raiders when you're just going to be the punching bag of the AFC West for at least another 2 years? I mean, that roster is nowhere near contention. Yes, you've got the number one pick. You've got lots of cap space, but the Raiders have had that for years now. You've got an aging Max Crosby, who's like your sort of top piece. You've had Ashton Genty, who I think can be a good running back, but the offensive line is nowhere near where it needs to be. That is a multi-year rebuild in a division where you got to get past the Chargers, the Broncos, and the Chiefs. And I know the Chiefs had a down year, but that's still like 3 teams that are perennially contending. And you have to, in order to play winning football, you have to play those teams 6 times a year, right? How many of those games are you winning? Like, you're already in the hole just from your division. And because of that, you're going to be in rough shape to make the wild card too. That is such a tough spot. I don't really think any of the top candidates are going to want to go there and sign up to lose for multiple years. It's a tough way to start your career. You go to Atlanta, to the NFC South, where an 8-9 team just won the division. This division's terrible. You don't even have to have a home run season to make the playoffs your first year. And I think that is very underrated. As the Panthers, they won the division, but they're not impressive. The Bucks are kind of decelerating and looking like they're not as good as people thought. They're actually exactly what I thought they'd be this year. And the Saints, I think Tyler Shuck's efforts, Tyler Shuck looked interesting, but they played one of the softest finishes in the NFL. Tyler Shuck got to play a lot of terrible teams, and now everyone's like, oh, he's definitely going to be our quarterback of the future. Tyler Shuck looked fine, but Tyler Shuck has limitations too, and he's also been hurt as much or more than Michael Penix, and they ran him a lot, and I don't think that's sustainable. So we will see. We will see what happens there. But this division is ripe for the taking. You don't have to get past anybody. All you got to do is have a good offseason, find a bridge quarterback until Penix is ready. And then, look, if it doesn't work, you're probably going to have a high pick next year because you don't, or whatever. And then you can reset next year and get your quarterback. But, I think there's a lot of jobs open right now. Obviously, the Ravens job is the cream of the crop. And a lot of people are talking up the Dolphins job. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that it's a solid job, but there's issues in that division too. You got a lot of tough teams. The Falcons is I would say the softest spot. If you're looking to get into a job, have a good offseason and contend, I don't know that there's a better option than in Atlanta. There's no juggernaut teams you have to get past or hope that fall over for you. You just got to win 9 to 10 games and you're set. You don't have to do a whole lot. So I think that's kind of an underrated aspect of this job. Yeah, the quarterback position's a little bit up in the air, but a lot of people think that the lack of the first round pick is a problem, which it is. I mean, it would be a lot better if they had the first round pick, but they got 2 great players in last year's draft for that first round pick, right? So They just took their first round pick early. The defense took a huge step forward. I mean, honestly, like, I think this job is a lot better than people think. I think the Falcons will probably be able to get their guy, whichever one it is that they want. I think they'll be competitive. I think Blank will pay whatever it takes. I don't think money will be a holdup. I mean, I don't think they're going to give someone like a 10-year contract or something insane like that, but I think they will make a very compelling offer, and they will, and they'll be able to get money. Like, they can free up a lot more money. They're probably going to post June 1st cut Darnell Mooney. That's another $12 million that they're going to free up on top of the 30 that they have now. They can get even more by making a few other cuts. They can do if they do this Drake London extension, which they will definitely do, they can free up even more. Like, money is not going to be an issue. Yeah, you don't have a first round pick. Maybe they tag Pitts. Maybe they tag and trade Pitts. And if you do that, I think you can get a day 2 pick for Kyle Pitts. So, or you have Kyle Pitts here, which, I think he looks like he's heating up to me. Like, he's finally got it. So, I mean, I don't know that I would go straight to like extending Kyle Pitts at this point. But they want to tag him and see if he can string together another good year. The tight end tag is not that expensive. Like, he's going to be cheaper than a wide receiver too with a tag. So, I'm not opposed to that either. I'm really curious to see what the new coaching staff does here. And we'll talk, we've talked about some of the candidates. We can keep going in that direction here. We got Jason Gaines with the $2 saying, "Happy New Year, Kevin." Happy New Year, Jason. Thank you. I was happy that Will McFadden did not write an article on the website in favor of bringing back Raheem, which is what he did when Arthur Smith was fired. # shots fired. Also, I can't wait for the Rams to blow out the Panthers tomorrow. I mean, look, I love Will because Will speaks his mind. He's not afraid to say things that people might not agree with. And I think he, was passionate about thinking that Arthur Smith did deserve another chance. And I think a lot of us disagree with that, but I respected Will for being willing to write that article because it's easy to write an article that everyone agrees with. I won't say that writing my Raheem article was very controversial or anything like that, right? I mean, I think we all kind of feel that way. Not very brave on my part, but writing something I think it would be much more brave to write an article in support of Raheem Morris. I would also be, annoyed by reading that and be like, I think you're wrong, but I respect your gumption in writing something like that. We got, I also hope the Rams blow out the Panthers tomorrow. I don't think the Panthers are going to be able to fool them twice. That's my take there. We got Spenny A with the 2 Canadian, Bijan Robinson. That is it. That's the appeal of ATL. Well, I mean, no, like there is more, like, I mean, even if we're being like super objective, Drake London's great. Drake London probably would have challenged for top 3, top 4 receiving yards this year if he'd stayed healthy. I think he's a legit number 1. I think you've got Chris Lindstrom, who's arguably the best guard in the NFL on the offensive side. Bijan Robinson is a Hall of Fame player. And yes, like, Bijan Robinson is a huge sell. You can build an offense around Bijan Robinson. And that's why I think people maybe overrate the quarterback thing. I think you can go find, like, Malik Willis would be so perfect here. It's kind of part of the reason I want Matt LaFleur, because it's like, oh man, we could get Matt LaFleur in here. LaFleur could be like, hey, Malik, why don't you come on over? You'll give you a shot in Atlanta while Penix is getting healthy. And, if you play great, you probably hold on to this job. I think you could build such a dangerous offense out of read option with Malik Willis and Bijan Robinson. That scares the shit out of me. Bijan is becoming truly like an all-around elite player, like a Christian McCaffrey. He's set, franchise record in scrimmage yards, and I feel like he's still got room to grow. So yes, Bijan Robinson is a large draw, and you don't always say that about a running back, but he is truly one of those special guys. And I think if the Falcons had a better offense and a better scheme, he could have set even more records. And I think that's still in his future. We might be looking at the best Falcons player of all time when it's all said and done. It's going to be hard to unseat Matt Ryan. It's going to be hard to unseat Julio, but I think he's reaching for those heights. With what we've seen so far, he may be challenging those guys. So we'll see. We'll see. He's got a long way to go to get to those lofty heights, but he has really, really done everything he can so far. All right, I'm gonna take a sip here before my throat gets too dry. But yeah, if they keep Pitts finished as like the number 2 tight end in the NFL. I think. I didn't look it up after the last couple games, but I think. Let's see. 2025 leaders. Let's see. We got So shout out to Pro Football Reference, by the way. Love Pro Football Reference. You can get all stats you need like immediately. This is not like an advertisement. This is just like a fact here. All in easily sortable charts, which I just love. All right. So I think we've got it sorted properly now. Okay, yes. Tight end. Yes. Kyle Pitts was the number 2 tight end in the NFL with 928 yards. He missed 1,000 by just a little over 70. But yeah, Pitts also set a career high in touchdowns. He tied Travis Kelce with 5. There were several guys that had more. I know Dallas Goedert and Trey probably both tied for like 11 touchdowns, which is crazy. Good for them. But I think Pitts is clearly on the upswing. I think almost all of his metrics improved this year. He almost had 1,000 yards for a second time as a tight end, which is very difficult to do. And I'm really impressed. So I think, I would still hesitate to give him a long-term extension right now. I would do the tag, let it play out, and see where you are after that. But I think if you tag him and you get somebody offers you a first or something, you really have to consider that. No, Spenny, I got you. Yeah, I think you were trying to emphasize how important Bijan is for the appeal of Atlanta. I get what you're saying. And yeah, I agree with you. Bijan is kind of the piece de resistance, or whatever you might say it in French. If I probably butchered that. There's probably some French person that's like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that. But, yeah, Bijan is a huge draw. We know that. I think the offensive line as a whole is good. I think center, somewhere they need to address. Long-term tackles, obviously, as well. But, we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. But I think on the defensive side, that used to be kind of a black hole. Now I think you look at that defense as like, this is a defense you can win with. And this defense carried this team in many games this year, had some of their best performances against some of their best opponents. The pass rush is just absolutely dynamic. And I think, honestly, this Falcons defense might be like one of the biggest draws. And I think, honestly, the presence of Jeff Ulbrich and that staff being intact could go a long way to convincing one of these guys to come that might otherwise be a little bit concerned about like, I'm not really like, I've got ideas for my defense, but I'm not really sure. And I think you could see, like I think a Clint Kubiak would absolutely love to be able to walk into this situation with, a defense basically ready-made that he doesn't have to really, do a whole lot with. He could just kind of focus on the offense, which is what we need. Then, I think someone like Kevin Stefanski might be someone who's a little bit more interested in maybe bringing in like a Jim Schwartz or whatever. I do think that, Jim Schwartz would also be a really intriguing guy to have here, but, we will see. We will see how that plays out. But I do think the presence of Ulbrich and this defense really being on the upswing, and the pass rush in particular looking great. I'm excited, and I think that that could go a long way into convincing some of these guys, like a Mike McDaniel or a Clint Kubiak or something like that, to come to Atlanta, where they don't really have to worry so much about that stuff. All right, we got Alex Foster with the $5. Thank you, Alex. Considering it's the Falcons, is there anyone you're scared of getting the head coaching job? Honestly, I'm not too scared of them like making like a terrible decision or something. I do think that like I think if Matt Ryan comes here, I feel very comfortable with like his sort of what I'm looking for, his vision and direction. It seems like he wants an offensive guy, so I'm into all that stuff. I think I would lean away from like a Mike McCarthy type guy or one of these retreads. I think based on everyone who the Falcons have talked to so far, I pretty much like all of them. I really wouldn't go for any of these defensive guys. I know their Falcons are talking to Jeff Hafley. They're talking to Vance Joseph, talking to Anthony Weaver. I don't think any of those guys are guys that I would want. I I really don't think any of those guys are really in contention either. I think they're trying to cast a wide net, but I don't really think they're serious about any of those guys. I think the offensive ones are the ones to pay attention to, with Stefanski, with Kubiak, with Mike McDaniel, and then we'll see if Matt LaFleur shakes loose. We'll see if they want to talk to anyone else. But yeah, I know Brandon Brass is asking about, McDaniel's. Could he be McDaniel? Could he be the OC? I mean, if he doesn't get like a head coaching job, then yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people would be really after him to be their OC. I think the Falcons would have a tough time getting him if, they had Clint Kubiak. I think the most likely scenario, honestly, where McDaniel comes here as the OC is if the Falcons get Kevin Stefanski, who, has called plays but also has been happy to have an OC do it. And I wonder if he is maybe looking to be more of like an overall coach and not just an offensive coordinator type, but he is offensive and does provide a lot of stability there. But I think if the Falcons were to get Stefanski and Stefanski was like, hey Mike, I'll let you call the plays, that's probably their best path to getting that OC, getting him as OC. But yeah, I agree with like what Solaire would be saying is like, if Mike McDaniel's not the head coach, he's probably going to go to the place where he thinks he can get the best offense. And that's probably like Detroit, right? I mean, I think that makes too much sense. I could see, maybe Baltimore too. If they're really looking for someone to reinvigorate that offense, maybe he could go there as well. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm leaning with those guys. I do think that the defensive guys I wouldn't really be interested in. That's just kind of my take on it. I'm just not really a defensive head coach guy. I think the offensive coaches that they're talking to are all interesting though, and we'll see if any more enter the fray. We'll see what happens with Matt LaFleur this weekend as well. Well, I don't think it doesn't seem like FanDuel's got odds on the Falcons coaching search. That would have been some fun odds to get you. But we could talk about some of the games this weekend. And I know you guys mentioned that Panthers game as one that we'll be all keeping an eye on, I'm sure. So bring a couple lines for this round of the playoffs. We got the Los Angeles Rams as 10.5-point favorites over the Carolina Panthers in round one. That's pretty aggressive. But it's also hilarious that the road team in the first round of the playoffs is a 10-point favorite over the home team. It's wild to me. But yeah, that one's interesting. And then, yeah, speaking of the Matt LaFleur thing, I agree with you, Solaire. I don't understand why they would fire him, but there's a lot of smoke around it. So if it does happen, currently the Packers are on the road against the Bears, and the Packers are actually 1.5-point road favorites. So, it would be an upset at this point if the Bears were to beat the Packers, which doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but, I guess maybe the Packers are healthier now or whatever. But that's another line there from FanDuel. Thanks to those guys for sponsoring the show. But yeah, I mean, at this stage, what we're looking for is just some clarity in the Falcons situation. So the first domino that's going to fall is Matt Ryan getting hired, and, maybe we'll get that soon. We'll see. But once that's done, I think they will quickly move to hire Ian Cunningham. I don't think that Cunningham, that's that contentious. I think a lot of these interviews that they've done for president of football are kind of just the first round of their GM interviews. We'll see if they bring anyone else back for the second round other than Cunningham. But my take is that, it's going to be Ian Cunningham. It's going to be Matt Ryan. So the question then becomes the head coach. That one might take a little longer. I think we'll learn a lot about what the Falcons want to do from their head coaching decision. And, I think if it's Kevin Stefanski, we're going to probably see a bridge guy brought in. I think if it's maybe like a Kubiak or maybe like, I'm thinking about some of these other guys like like Clint Kubiak or Mike McDaniel, they may want to see more from Penix before, and also get a bridge guy. But I feel like a Stefanski might be like more like looking for a bridge guy that could start, long term. Obviously, if the Falcons get Matt LaFleur, the Malik Willis thing makes too much sense to get him here. And I think some of these guys might want to just sort of see, like, we're just going to kind of bring in a solid backup, and we're going to hope that Penix is ready to go quickly. And if not, or if Penix can't get healthy or struggles, we're just going to put our resources into the 2027 quarterback class and be preparing basically to get another quarterback in the draft if we need to. And the 2027 class, which, looks strong at this time, we'll see. Everybody's always kind of talking about, various, this quarterback class is going to be so good and this one's not going to be good. We don't really know much about that, right? It always kind of changes. And sometimes classes are better or worse than even we predict, even the smart people. So we will see. We will see how that happens. But, I think the most interesting hire will obviously be head coach, because I think that's the one that is the least clear. I think there's 4 guys, if LaFleur gets, released, that are going to be in strong contention. But yes, I mean, I think, Clint Kubiak is probably higher up the list than most people think. I think, the Falcons would probably be really happy to talk to Mike McDaniel as well. And, I do think Stefanski is a contender, but, I think it comes down to how well these guys mix, like sort of mesh with Matt Ryan's vision and Ian Cunningham's vision, and kind of how well do they all fit together. I think a lot of these guys are all sort of Shanahan disciples, right? But how are they different? How do each of them sort of want to go about things? Do some guys want to be more pass heavy? Do some guys want to have a bunch of tight ends? Do some guys want to do, have a fullback and go that route? Do some guys really want to invest in quarterback or try to sort of get by with, Arthur Smith style with quarterback scraps or whatever? I mean, there's going to be variations to how these guys like want to go about running this Shanahan style offense. And that might be sort of the deciding factor, because I think these guys are all talented. I think they're all smart, clever offensive coaches that all can deliver a good scheme to Atlanta. Then it becomes like, how well can you run a team? And it does seem like the Falcons might be leaning towards guys with experience. So that would make you lean Stefanski or McDaniel or LaFleur if he breaks free. But otherwise, I think there's just not a whole lot we can say at this point, because the interviews haven't happened. There's not been much buzz, but the one thing that I have heard is that don't sort of count out Clint Kubiak as like clearly behind these other guys. The belief is that Kubiak will be a strong contender and could even end up emerging as the top choice. And I think you can tell by how many teams are interested in talking to him. He is someone that has really rocketed up people's boards and is really at the top of a lot of people's lists. And that should, excite you. And I think, again, that's how it has to go sometimes. If you want to get these young offensive guys, you got to get there a year early, with like Ben Johnson. Like, I think nobody made him a strong enough offer, and he went back to the Lions. And then, then he was clearly the number 1 coach, and like only the team with sort of the best situation or the best offer could convince him to come. Whereas the Falcons, I think, not everyone might be ready to give Kubiak the opportunity, but the Falcons could be that team to give him, the job a year early, let him, expect some growing pains. But, if they really believe in his vision for the offense and his ability as a coach to get the best of guys, he kind of has a little bit of a flat affect. I think, he'd be different than like a Raheem Morris in that regard. I think some people might find him sort of interesting. Some people might find him kind of boring as a talker. But I mean, to me, I just want you to be a good coach. I don't really care how personable you are in the press conference or how nice you are or whatever. I just want results, right? So we will see how that goes. But Solaire needs a draft take. All right, Solaire, hold on one second. I'll have to find you a draft take here. There was somebody I was looking at the other day, and I'm trying to remember his name now. Here we go. Okay. Gonna pull it up. All right. Yes. So, looking at the second round now, for guys that I think the Falcons would be interested in, I think there are a number of players. So I'll give you right now my top sort of thoughts. Um, I really do like Casey Concepcion. I think it's likely that he will be gone before the Falcons pick in the second round. So not really sure if that's going to be something the Falcons can do. I think someone like Caden McDonald as a nose tackle, like you're probably going to take him in the second, but I do think like that's kind of the last piece the Falcons need on the defensive line. I would love to get a big nose tackle in here. I think that would be awesome. I think this is a really strong nose tackle class, and I think there's guys like Amari Washington that would probably be there in the second round as well. I know there's Lee Hunter from Texas Tech, Dante Corleone, who's kind of been someone that's been interesting for a while. There's a lot. Dominique Orange from Iowa State. Quite a few of these guys are very interesting, and then I think we could also be looking at like a center here. I think that's maybe more of a third round thing, but like Jake Slaughter from Florida, he's someone that I like a lot as sort of like that offensive line guy. I know Connor Liu from Auburn is someone that has kind of moved up people's boards, but I think wide receiver, nose tackle, and center to me are like the three positions on day 3 that I'm kind of circling. I think corner is probably going to move into that range too. Linebacker could be in play. I haven't really done a whole lot of work on those guys yet, but it may just be sort of like who's the best guy that falls. Like I'm really hoping that Ian Cunningham is the Eagles style guy, or like maybe the Ravens style, where the Falcons are trying to trade down, trying to amass picks, trying to start playing various like games with the system, like collecting comp picks and trading down and collecting more resources and building more through the draft. I really hope that Ian Cunningham is of that mind and kind of letting the draft fall to you, trading down, that sort of stuff. We'll see. Also, Larry started Knights of the Old Republic. Awesome. Yeah, that game, if you can get it to run on your computer, the Steam version usually runs okay on modern computers. But yeah, Knights of the Republic is awesome. Love that game. Really excited for the new one. Then we got Alex Foster with the $5 saying, all right, if Arthur Blank pays attention to the Falcoholic, how come you guys haven't had him on? Does he have any brews to recommend? We need answers, Kevin. Look, I've tried, I've got Brett Jukes on. Okay, that's the VP of the Falcons, right? I mean, that's, so if Arthur Blank, like I have an open invitation to Arthur Blank. If Mr. Blank, you ever want to come on and talk directly to the fans, give him your brews recommendations, maybe fine wine recommendations. I don't know what Arthur Blank drinks. Maybe he doesn't even drink. But would love to talk to Arthur Blank at any opportunity. Hopefully the vibes around the team just get better and less contentious and less sort of hostile. That's my hope. I think with all of this stuff kind of boiling over and major changes coming, I'm hoping that will also happen and the sort of the demeanor of the team will change. Corey, you're thinking of Brett Jukes, who was another one of the executives that we had on. But yeah, we've had Brett on a couple times. Love to have Brett back on too. All right. I think that's about it for now. The team has not announced Matt Ryan's hire, so they're probably as soon as I sign off, they will. And I'm sure that it'll happen soon, guys. Yes, there's probably going to be new uniforms. We've heard a lot of buzz that the Falcons have filed for new uniforms. I think it's going to happen. The red helmets will be a thing. I don't think it's gonna be an every week thing, but they will have a red helmet that they wear regularly. I'm excited to see the design. Apparently, I believe it's going to be a play on sort of the throwback uniforms with sort of a modern twist. With the red stripe and all that, or like the red and the black and the stripe and all that. I think it's going to be a modern twist on that throwback uniform. Then they will also have the throwback uniforms that they wear too. So we'll see. I'm interested to see those uniforms. That's going to be really exciting. But before we get there, we're going to get Matt Ryan hired as president, probably Ian Cunningham hired as GM, and then probably going to have a week or two here where we're kind of waiting to see what happens with the head coach. We're going to get a lot of interviews. A lot's going to happen. It's going to be fast and furious. We're going to have a lot more shows for you guys. going forward, and then, of course, Senior Bowl will be at the end of the month. I'll be back in Mobile to kick off draft season. Yeah, we're going to get to all that stuff. But before we sign off tonight, I want to thank all of you guys, of course. I want to thank FanDuel for sponsoring tonight's show, presenting the Falcoholic Live tonight. If you guys haven't done so already, please do like and subscribe. Really appreciate everyone for doing that. Leave a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice, too. That'd be really cool. We got one more from Jason Gaines here. With the $2 saying, Dan Quinn is right on schedule to be fired by the Commanders. He fired his DC and his GM fired his offensive coordinator due to disagreements. It's 2019 all over again for Dan Quinn. Maybe he can hire Raheem to finish off his defense. Oh, God. That would be pretty funny. So I'm interested to see. I mean, Raheem's getting head coaching interviews. We'll see. I think Raheem to the Titans could be a thing. We'll see. But yeah, I think it would make a lot of sense, honestly, for Raheem to go back with Dan Quinn or head back to Los Angeles if there's an opening there. But yeah, honestly, Dan Quinn, Raheem going to Dan Quinn or maybe to the Cowboys because the Cowboys can't get Ulbrich, that could be something that we see for sure. Arthur Smith to the Titans. Yes, Solaire, that would be perfect. Absolutely perfect. No notes. But thank you guys so much for joining us here. If you want to support the show, patreon.com/Falcoholic Live. And also, you can join up here with the YouTube channel memberships. Thanks to all of our channel members for supporting us. Really appreciate you guys. We will be back next week. We will see, if we get crazy, news over the weekend, we'll probably do an emergency show. But, given that we've kind of already talked about Matt Ryan and Ian Cunningham, I think those two hires probably going to prompt more of an early week show, not necessarily a weekend show because, it's not really that big of a surprise now, right? But I guarantee when we get the head coach hire, we'll have a show for that. We'll be back to our weekly Falcoholic Lives at the normal time. And I'll probably start mixing in some other shows during the week of just talking about offseason things. Maybe do, a quarterback discussion, positions of need, some draft takes. We'll have a mock draft soon. Kind of waiting until we see who the hires are before I do a mock because I think that will maybe impact the direction this team is going in the draft. But, the offseason stuff is coming soon. Free agency, draft. I'm going to take a look at the cap and all that stuff, deep dive into those topics for you guys. There's a lot to talk about, a lot to cover. But first things first, let's get this president, let's get this GM, and let's get this head coach in the building, and we can start moving forward from there. New future, new direction for the Falcons. I'm excited. I know you guys are too. We'll hope that this time they'll get it right. Missed a couple times now. But before that, there were some hits. There were some good years. So hopefully this will be the change that's necessary to take the next step for this football team. We have to believe in something. So I believe in Matt Ryan. If I can't trust Matt Ryan, I don't know who I can trust at this point. So we will talk to you guys real soon next time on the Falcoholic Live and Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Until then, folks, have a great night. Thanks for